The third session for the day is on building people-centric business models in renewable energy. This session will explore the essential elements of creating a supportive ecosystem that encourages the evolution and adoption of people-centric business models in renewable energy sector. This session will be moderated by Mr. Karthik Ganesan. He is a fellow and director, Research Coordination, CEW. He is also an internal advisor across research teams that creates institutional platform to support innovation. So I would welcome Mr. Karthik Ganesan on the dais. We also have a very interesting panel of speakers. We have Mr. Sandeep Kashyap, CEO, Renewable Business, RPSG. Ravi Verma, National Head Policy and Strategy, Avada. We have Ms. Radhika Kaniganti, ESG and Sustainability from Wipro. She will be joining us through an online link. We have Ms. Simran Grover, founder and CEO, Center for Energy, Environment and People. And we have Mr. Chintan Shah, Group President, Renew. I welcome all the speakers on the stage, please. Thank you so much for joining us today. Karthik, I hand over the dice to you.
Great. Am I audible? Great. Hi, Simran. Welcome on board. Leading into this session, we'd written a piece a few weeks ago. We were thinking, why is responsible, energy becoming big? Is it that we haven't gotten the idea of deploying energy in general? Isn't that been gotten right? And with that thought, I wanted to sort of, approach some of the stalwarts who are sitting on that side of the table. Especially Mr. Verma, maybe I'll start with you, right? We spoke briefly in the break. You've obviously had a stint at thermal power generation, helping conceptualize and also make way for some of those big projects to come. So in what way do you feel that the imperative for energy being responsible, right, has come from what perhaps was wrong with how energy projects were being sort of approved and conceptualized and built from a thermal power perspective or more broadly conventional energy perspective?
Yeah, thank you and good afternoon. And thank you for having me here.
Things are switched on, Mr.
Yeah.
Button over left, right? It's on. Perfect. Now
hello. Yeah. So thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. So based on my experience, as you wanted some experience with respect to conventional energy as well. So we have done a long leap from this, we call it dirty energy to a clean energy. So this energy transition, which has been happening, earlier it was like subcritical, then critical, then supercritical. So in that sense, we have been making efforts so that more and more environment-friendly technologies are being adopted to produce energy. And then this FGD thing came so that more and more whatever flue gases we have been emitting into the environment are reduced. Actually, the way we have been working, it's just reduction. And whatever way energy efficiency we have been talking about, whatever is the waste heat being generated through various processes in the industrial. So we have been utilizing them to produce energy, that is electricity as well, or heating purposes. So on that score, we have been working to reduce it. But this renewable, it is a total quantum jump, where we are not talking about reduction in carbon emissions. We are asking about zero. And presently we talk about net zero, then we have to have absolute zero. So, and in the renewable space, progress has been done a lot with the help of the policies framed by the government. They started very humble beginning with 1 megawatt, then 5 megawatt. Now,
Mr. Verma, if I may interject very briefly. So what I wanted to actually focus on was, conventional energy projects also required, to be cited somewhere, right? Yeah. People consultation would happen, approvals would be taken. Now, what do you think was falling short in that process that we have to think about, okay, how do we do it differently for renewable energy? Right? Do you feel like, some processes were being circumvented, that people were not necessarily convinced about the way those projects were conceptualized? I mean, you can take the example, for instance, of, even the Adani projects, right? Today, for instance, we are looking at bringing back the mangroves that unfortunately we lost in the process of bringing some of those projects on board. So obviously at the time of consideration of the project, it wasn't given thought. So do you feel that that was the case, given that you were involved in some way, in the regulatory affairs of those projects?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. The thing is that the siting of the power projects, which was happening in the public sector, it was a very long detailed survey. So they have been very conscious about while selecting the particular site, whether it is near the raw material or near the load centers. So, and probably they were looking for where the land is easily available. Land is always, and since ages, it has been a fight for the land. So, land acquisition has already been a tough, even though there were regulatory thing, this Land Acquisition Act, through various channels you can have that. But that was the main regulatory thing. So, even though these regulations were there, then acquisition was a very difficult. The land requirement is also huge. And then with respect to the environmental, so there were guidelines. You have to have quite distant from a national park or eco-sensitive zone, or like for the say CRZ, so don't pollute this ocean economy, the ocean species and all that. So all those things they were there, and with the entry of this in the 2003 onwards, when this Electricity Act came and this power generation was totally denotified, and anybody can produce electricity at any place. So there were no permission was in fact required to set up this thing. Only whatever the sector specific, whether environment, or if you are putting up a chimney, you have to have a distance from the nearest airport. So these were the things which you have to keep in mind while citing this site. And for this renewable energy, so in fact there is no such emissions, no raw material movement. There is no, and further like thermal, you have to have movement of coal, or if the gases, either you have to have pipeline. There's a huge water requirement. You have to have water pipeline. You have to this ROW, land acquisition for water. So all those things, they were there. So that's why the time span also for we have to range from 5 years to 6 years, maybe more, depending on if there is some involvement of forest land, then project may take a number of years. Then if near some, so there were certain projects which were near the eco-sensitive zone, or so we need to have this forest clearance, or this even national wildlife clearance as well. If certain activities, even though not non-polluting, but if when you require certain land due to make it contribute.
So what you're saying is that there were, of course, a whole lot of procedures and regulations in place, and to the most part they were being followed in some way, even in the case of conventional projects.
Correct.
Perhaps RE, we know, of course, was outside of some of those regulations, and I'll probably then move to Chintan, Mr. Verma. I mean, we'll come back to you. Chintan, you've of course been here in the sector for, 3 decades now, I guess, right? Close to.
Less than that.
Okay, slightly less than that, right? So how have things changed in the way renewable energy deployment has happened, let's say, from the early days of Suzlon to what you now see at Renew, and the way you approach, whether it's siting, whether it's engagement with the public on various issues pertaining to the project itself?
Yeah, thanks. I'm shy of 2 years. So good afternoon, everyone. I've seen this entire dynamics getting changed since last 3 decades. So obviously, when we started off in renewables somewhere in early 90s, I think land has always been a challenge in a country like India. So the problem keeps on changing, and it keeps on evolving. So initially, since the number of installations are so less, I think land was not a greater challenge in those days. So almost every project that was brought up in India was essentially to buy land, or essentially lease out land on a revenue from the revenue department of the government or forest department. We have 3 types of land in India, as you know: private, revenue, and forest. So you can categorize these 3. And obviously, as I said, the pressure was less. It was more of exploratory and things like that. What we've seen somewhere in 2001, 2002, at least at that time, wind was the mainstay. And just for the audience at large, a megawatt of wind power would require about 20 acres of free land. You don't have to own it. The land has to be kept free because you don't want any establishments or construction to come in to interfere with the wind. So the logic was you buy the entire 25-acre land. That was the logic in India till 2000, 2001. When this market started exploding, this became a big number. Then the industry evolved into a footprint. What you require is a footprint. So people started buying footprint, a 4-acre footprint for a turbine, which is also true today. 1 to 1.25 hectares is per turbine that you require the land for doing a foundation, for movement of cranes, and the pathways to reach that place. So the pressure to buy land reduced. That's even today also, bulk of the wind projects are purely on footprint basis. But in case of solar, that was not the case. You require the entire land. It initiated from about 4 to 5 acres per megawatt to now reduced about 2.5 to 3 acres a megawatt, depending how the orientations are, the efficiencies, and the trackers you put. So the land requirement has reduced, but the question is you still require a contiguous land in solar. That's the nature of the technology. So you have two type of things, buying of footprint for wind as well as buying the entire or accessing the entire contiguous land for solar. And once you had gone beyond 2012, 13 and all, it essentially, the entire investor mix also got changed in India, from moving from a corporate client or an HNI to a IPP sort of a client, where essentially looking at an IRR, you're looking at ultimate returns on your revenue. Now, the moment of returns on a revenue, it no longer is important that you buy a land. Because on an IRR formula, buying of land or leasing of land will have no implications. So people started moving from a CapEx model to an OpEx model. That means nowadays, bulk of the land that people are procuring is on lease basis, even at private land. Obviously, there was a major shift because there were a lot of resistance coming from the lenders, because whole idea is how do you create a mortgage on a leasehold. But then that issue also has been resolved through hypothecation. So now almost every lender in India is accepting a leasehold land on a long-term basis, a mortgage can be created. So that was another. So this is what I'm trying to tell you over here is there were challenges and they got solutions to it. Now the problem with the land and renewables is very unique because renewables is agnostic to where the resource is. I mean, it doesn't say that okay, there's a private land, so I'll be there. So a resource is a resource. Now, when you have a resource, you have, again, I said, 3 categories of land. Now we had personally faced a classical case of you got a revenue land or a forest land, and when you go to the ground, you find there are people tilling on that land. So technically, on paper, it's supposed to be owned by the government, but in reality, there are farmers there. They've been tilling from last 70 years, 60 years, and all, because you don't have demarcation so easily done in India. So you have this another challenge when you also got a land on a leasehold from a government. What you do with these farmers who are tilling there? So obviously that settlement has to happen. It's a commercial settlement, and it's a dialogue that happens, and there's no straight good rule or a bad rule to that. Every location has its own set of rules. So this is also getting sorted out. While going forward, as I was trying to tell you today, for example, how a leasehold land is commercially done, settled. For example, if I'm a farmer, what we've seen until now in India is, barring sugarcane, barring certain cash crops, bulk of the farmers have a yield of 30,000, 35,000 rupees per acre per year. That's the average number that people get. So that is also the lease number today offered by renewables. So that particular landlord or the farmer still gets a revenue, which he was supposed to anyway yield it through tilling. So you pay it as a lease rental, and then there's an escalation clause in it. You can have a long-term lease with a 3 years escalation in it and all. And after 25 or 30 years, you can renegotiate the lease for a little. And you also give some certain fixed deposit or a security deposit. That's the structure today. It benefits the landlord. What it doesn't capture is a landlord in India or a farmer in India would still have workers working in that field. Now they do get displaced when you put up a project over there. That is something which we need to figure it out while moving forward. Because today we are at 150 gigawatt roughly renewables. We are talking at 500 gigawatt by 2030. And this issue is bound to come up. If you're asking me a solution, I don't have a solution right now. But the industry has been so nice and so dynamic. I'm quite sure we'll be evolving a solution around it.
Sure.
But essentially, we'll be able to internalize this particular social displacement that happens because of projects coming up. Good part is you have places like Khavda in Gujarat, where the government of Gujarat itself has demarcated tracts and tracts of land which doesn't have a population.
Yep.
Over there, the social impact is minimal.
Yeah.
The issue would come up where essentially putting up projects where you do have a social impact.
Sure.
That is something that we need to evolve in the coming period. And I personally feel that in future, when you're looking at such social displacement, agri-PV seems to be one of the feasible option, a viable option, because essentially you also continue your farming as well as you do generate your solar photovoltaic, electricity from solar photovoltaic. In case of wind, that's not an issue because it's a footprint. You can still have your farming activity in and around the windmills.
Right.
So that's something which I consider.
Great. Thank you, Chintan, for for that detailed elaboration. I'll move next to Mr. Kashyap. You've obviously had a diverse experience as well. Between ACME and now, of course, at RPG, the RSPG, right? What in your assessment of the projects that ACME has developed, right? ACME is a new player, right? They came in with a lot of big ambition, so suddenly large scaling up. So, what are the challenges that you encountered in whether it's engaging with the local public, and you of course ventured into new territory? For instance, you have projects in the state of Odisha, right, which is historically not an RE sort of focused state. Right. So, what are the challenges that you encountered, and how did you look to address some of them?
First of all, I would like to say that Chintan has explained the whole synopsis of our industry very, very well.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There is hardly anything to add on. However, I'll tell you one story. So we are setting up. When I was in ACME, we were setting up one of the largest single location solar park or solar project, which was 1200 megawatt AC, 1800 megawatt DC. And
can you be a little louder? I think even I'm finding it difficult to hear. Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we were developing a single location, one of the largest solar project, 1200 megawatt AC and 1800 megawatt DC, for which we were looking at almost 5,000 plus acres of land. And when we started the land acquisition, we had a couple of land facilitators. So one of the biggest issue before I come to this story is when we acquire land, it is very rare I have seen any company directly goes into the field and understand the local community. So generally what we find is land facilitators who could get us the land, and more or less we are generally not bothered what the community is all about, what their feelings are about the project, if at all they are known. And sometimes we get into the hands of wrong land facilitators who kept on giving wrong commitments to those villagers while taking the land or acquiring the land, which comes back to us only when we go and take possession or start setting up the project. So I was talking about this 1200 megawatt project, wherein we had to do 5,000 plus acres of land, and we had 2 land facilitators working for us. And one of the land facilitators was actually very actively engaged with the local community and was able to do the land acquisition on the lease model very well, whereas the other one was a little notorious. So obviously they would want to have a contract, and they would want to do something in terms of maximizing their profits. And one of the very simple ways of doing that is the LFs keep on buying small pieces of land in between, so that once you come to that patch, they will sell you. And that creates a wrong precedence. So the whole village is actually giving you land on lease, and they know it, and suddenly they come to know that there is a small piece of land which is being sold at 5 lakh rupees a biga or acre, right? And the whole mindset changes that, we have been cheated almost, right? We were giving at 25,000 and now somebody is selling, and we want to also sell now. And suddenly there is a chaos. So, and during that time there was COVID as well, and in between we had to stop because of a lot of restrictions. So the whole thing was, when we went back, the whole village was standing in front of us or the LF, stating that we don't want to lease out any more land and we want to only sell, and the price is this. Right. So for a land which is not even 25, 30,000, 40,000 worth an acre, they're talking about 5 lakhs an acre. I personally went with my landhead, and then we started engaging, and we understood the situation that, the whole mindset has changed because we made a mistake. When I say we, means the LF made a mistake, and this is the outcome of that mistake. So how do we correct it? And we have to literally leave that land. We had to literally leave that land. And while I was there in the field, one small boy, maybe around 20 years or so, he came to us and he said, I want to do land for you. And I was shocked, a guy coming on a bike talking about 3,000 acres of land. And next day we met him. He brought all 30 years of papers. And he said, I'm a local. My family owns even 5,000 bighas of land in this space. And I'll get you the land. And we trusted him. He also trusted us. He said, I will not be able to do any government licensing, any help on that part. I will make sure the people will come and register, but you have to make sure that there is no cheating. There's nobody in between. And within 3 months' time, you won't believe it, we were able to register almost 2,000 acres of land flawlessly. So what I'm trying to say is, at times we only make mistakes, or our counterparts or our partners on the field, which reflects back onto us with so many challenges. And that's what is happening at some places. So it is very important for, I would say, all the developers to be there on the field. Look, we also need to see, when we are setting up a project, we are creating value for our promoters or our board members or our investors. And we also see that there is a value for us. We are a part of renewable energy. We are contributing to, in a certain way, net zero and climate change. But are we really looking at what value we are bringing to the landowners who are there? Are we making sure that we are not making any person landless when we are acquiring land? Are we making sure that we have been fair to each one of them? If there are people who are able to contribute to our project, are we giving them opportunities to work? And this is where, if we are not going, at least we should be able to clearly tell our partners who are working on our behalf, who are actually representing the company on ground on the land acquisition part. And this is where we have seen there are a set of LFs in Rajasthan and other places, wherein when they go for land acquisition, there is no problem. When you go for setting up the projects, you will not see even a single issue created by the locals. That's how they manage, because they include those people in their progress.
Sure.
Wherever it is missing, you have all the challenges.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Kashyap, for putting that clear. What I want the three of you to think about is, ultimately, does it just come down to the resources that you allocate? When I say resources, monetary, right? Whether that's from your bottom line or otherwise, is a different question. Is that what is going to make the difference, right? Is it really about cutting back on a cost, right, when it comes to community engagement and giving them what's their due, right? Or is it beyond that? So think about it. I'll move to Radhika. Radhika, hi. I'm not sure whether you can see us. Yes, I hope you can. I can see myself on the screen there. But, of course, you are a buyer of renewable energy. To that extent, you're not so involved in the setting up of projects, but you speak to the ESG commitments of the Wipro group and also looking at business sustainability. So when you buy renewable energy, right, surely, at some level, you're also worried about or concerned about, beyond the green credentials that it has, right, of the generation itself, what am I getting into? So as an entity that's procuring power, do you feel that you have a lever that you're able to use to get good quality projects onboarded? Or are you typically going and looking at, who's the most reliable provider out there, not so much concerned about, the other credentials, but Also, is the most reliable provider invariably the one that's also done it very well when it comes to project execution? To what extent do you see as a buyer, you're able to look at the history of a project and see what it brings to the table beyond just the CO2 mitigation, Radhika?
Okay, those are a lot of questions, but yeah, thank you for having me, and it's been actually really enlightening to listen to all the on the ground developers of RE. Can you hear me? Am I audible? Clear?
Loud and clear.
Okay.
Loud and clear. Yeah.
Okay, great. Right. So, Wipro's sustainability, I mean, the RE journey began, several years ago. And so I think the lowest hanging fruit for any corporate to start with RE transition are the green tariffs, right? And, we go through the ESCOMs, of each state and, purchase green tariffs. And of course, then we go a step further with PPAs, and most recently we just signed off on a group captive as well. The responsible part of it now, that is something that we are just now looking at, because with the green tariffs, unfortunately, we have very little visibility on who's providing the RE, right? I mean, so while it adds to our RE, quota in a sense, we really have very little visibility on who is providing the RE, who is the RE developer. We have a little bit more say in the PPAs and the group captive. Now, Wipro, of course, say group captive, for example, they would be a supplier for Wipro, and as with all suppliers, we of course require them to go through a set of they meet a certain set of requirements, and as well as sign off on our supplier code of conduct, which involves all the environment diversity part. But I think most recently, when we signed off on group captive, we actually had them fill out this questionnaire, I think that REI has developed, and got a lot of those details from them. And for Wipro, I mean, it is really important for us for the value add to be downstream as well, right? For us, it is the focus. Of course, we want to meet our net zero goals, and we want to transition to RE and everything. But I think not at the cost of community, and not at the cost of displaced workers. So I think that is something that we are kind of really clear about in terms of what kind of value do we want to bring. We don't want to we don't want to be very myopic in our view in that sense. So but again, I would like to say this is relatively new that we are kind of getting into, but that's one thing that we would definitely like to focus our energies on in terms of evaluating these the RE developers to from whom we purchase, right, and to say are they really taking care of all these issues?
Is there
right?
scope in sorry to interrupt you, Radhika, but is there scope, because you're so closely involved with ESG reporting? Does the ESG reporting framework itself give you enough wiggle room to allow for some of these metrics to be captured? Or do you feel like the requirements that are there under, whether it's BRSR or any other frameworks, right, they limit it to just the bare bones, so that you're not actually interested ever in taking a deeper look?
That's a good point, actually, because all of these reporting, including BRSR, they look very closely at what we are doing with our suppliers, right? And of course, RE, and a direct like a PPA or a group captive, they are our suppliers. So in that sense, yes, I mean, we do need to. The disclosure framework will require us, in a sense, to make sure that our suppliers meet certain criteria and are reporting on certain parameters, right? So that, when we're looking at the PP and group captive is there. But with green tariff, for example, like I mentioned, we really don't have a visibility on who the suppliers are. Now, that is something I would actually appeal to, in terms of, I don't know what the policymakers, for the ESCOMs to be more transparent on that. And because as a company, that's definitely something that we would like to track.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you for that, Radhika. And finally, that brings us to Simran, who, of course, is the is going to set the stage on fire with a lot of stuff that he's sort of picking up on the ground. So Simran, for context, of course, represents the civil society side, right, where they're actually working with the community. So Simran, of course, the developers have had their say in terms of what they attempt right on the ground, what goes wrong. We've heard about the land facilitators, who you're probably very familiar with, and we also see how the focus ultimately remains compensating the landowner. But obviously, in your interactions, you come across people who are not just the landowners, but the impacted community at large. What do you see as the imperative for responsible energy from the perspective of the community as a whole, and not just the landowners? Are we making this a bigger issue than it is, or do you feel it's a legitimate issue where there are multiple livelihoods being impacted because only the landowner is basically benefiting?
Right. Thanks, Karthik. So when I was sitting in the morning, I was sitting with deep concern for two reasons. One, of kind of the issues and the scale at which they're manifesting on the ground. But also I was concerned about the gap in this room in understanding of those issues, and at least in our perspective, what we are understanding and experiencing on the ground. But thank you for my panelists. I think you have a good grasp on what's really happening on the ground. So that is definitely reassuring. Of course, I'm sure you know a lot more, and everything can't be articulated on a panel like such as this. So I'm pretty confident that you know things better than me, right? But also, let me quickly say that my commentary is the work of my colleagues. I am just a CEO, which is a useless position. So my research team has done the fantastic work, and I've articulated also much of the commentary. So I'm just a medium of their thoughts and their work. And lastly, I will speaking from the context of Rajasthan. That's where we focus. Things might be very different from state to state, even within the state. Right, so please keep that in mind. But I'm sure there may be some similarities. There may be some learnings for other areas also, right? But how do we really begin to understand it? I'll be quick. Let me know if I need to shorten. See, one way to understand it is it's a play of policy, capital, local power, and climate goals. Climate goals we understand quite well. Policy, I think you guys discussed quite well. Keep in mind that every large-scale project has an impact. When you're looking at the scale, 5,000 acres of land, change in land use pattern, there will be loss of livelihood. There will be contestations on the value of land, which might be wasteland on paper, but as my colleagues shared here, peers shared here, that there might be farming, there might be pastures, there might be sacred land, which is not registered because in Rajasthan, nobody thought of 30 years back that people will come here in the desert and invest money, right? So nobody really cared about, and suddenly it's becoming a problem. We also have, a lot of international capital coming in at another scale, which is unprecedented. And when I started in the sector 14 years back, we had pilots of 1 megawatt, and suddenly we are not talking typically anything less than 500 megawatt, right? So the scale has changed completely. So I think some of the safeguards that were built around large-scale projects, and after a lot of people struggle, right, have been sort of dismantled in the name of clean energy. And that's one issue that I think needs a better understanding, and where industry can also come on board and actually more proactively advocate of finding solutions, because we are, as was highlighted,
can
nowhere
you clarify
near.
What has been, when you say dismantled, what is exactly?
Whether it's EIA exemptions, there are land ceiling limits by every state, right? So these are some of the basic safeguards that were there, which ensured that for every large-scale project, there was some, checks in place, community consultations in place, understanding of what social, environmental impact is there. And clean energy is, of course, clean technology, but still it does not stops it from competing with natural resources, right? So again, this is common knowledge. What I really want to take this opportunity is to talk about is how do we understand the problem? And our team and your team started working it on about 2 years back, I believe, 2.5 years. And I think the understanding from there emerged that it's a company and capital problem. Not a problem, so the arena in which we need to work is the companies, right? Companies can do certain things better, they can have better ESG practices and whatnot, and things will be better. My understanding, or our understanding, is now has shifted quite a bit. We are talking here about people-centric business. People are not binary. Communities are not binary. Especially when you look at heterogeneous communities, there can be conflict within communities. There is historical conflicts. There is caste and class structures that are in place. And what is happening that this unprecedented investments is seeding concentration of capital, power, political and otherwise also, within smaller elite groups, privileged groups within the company, right? Within the community. I'll give you an example. My team, a village in the Rajasthan, I will not take the name. 2 months back, a woman in the hamlet in labor could not go to the hospital. Community pooled together $3,000 to get the ambulance. In the same village, the Sarpanch, who owns an Endeavor, who owns a Mercedes, his complaint is he's not getting enough contracts, or his people are not getting enough contracts. So the problem, how I will articulate, is what we might be seeing. Again, I'm not sure right now, or we are too early to really say with a lot of confidence, but how we perceive or understand it right now is probably looking at climate change fueled feudalism on the grassroots, and which can be very oppressive, which could also take violent moves. And it is. Even companies are facing the brunt of it. There are people on the ground beaten up, when contracts are not allocated as their whims and wishes. So I think it just really needs a rethink on what is this role of policy and what is the role of companies also. But I'm really right now, since our understanding is also new, loss at what could be the possible solutions be. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, so what I'm hearing, Simran, right, is that there are, of course, underlying issues that ravage communities, right? Whether it's through caste, whether it's through feudal practices. And it so happens that RE is coming on board right now, and it's sort of the trigger for some of these to manifest, right? So it's not so much an RE specific issue as it is, really, if it was any industry, right? I'm presuming that these issues exist and that they're being exacerbated because the land requirement and the resource requirement of RE is phenomenal. And as a result, it concentrates the wealth in the hands of those few who own it. That's the primary one.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right there. RE characteristics which are important to note here. Again, the land requirements tends to be much larger. And the second part is the exemptions on EIA, etc. Those also have some contributions to it, which will not be for a typical like a thermal power plant.
Sure. Great. I think we had a first reasonably long round of comments. I think we have another 15 minutes to go. So what I'm going to do is this. I posed a question to the three of you, which is it a matter of resources being allocated? Radhika, I'll actually pose the same question to you as well. It's really saying, are you willing to basically pay more? Right? Is that the solution in your minds, right? Having seen what you have in your experience, Chintan, you may disagree, right? Is it about paying more for, the execution of the projects to ensure that there are safety nets in place? Or do you feel that paying alone won't get you, right? Because there's perhaps greed in the way that, he spoke about the last example, right? Where there is an LF who basically goes and instigates, and then the compensation starts sort of, snowballing. So is it really about allocating more resources, or is it really about, governance that needs to stem at a different level, which includes government, right? To enable this to happen in a way that's cost effective at the end of the day, that incentivizes also the creation of renewable energy assets. So I can start with Chintan, then Mr. Verma, and then Mr. Kashyap. Yeah.
So I'd like to, I have a little bit of a diverse view to what you're saying. And an investor who's going to invest into a project is going to invest for 25 years. So it's very, very important that project runs. That's the key to it. And in case of renewables, unlike thermal, there is no fuel involved. So that means every unit of generation is important. That has an impact on the IRR and profitability. So it's always in the mind of a generator or an investor that my plant is up and running technically 100% of the time. Now, what can go wrong? Definitely, social angles do have a play in terms of performance of a plant. You have ROW problems, right-of-way problems, or local issues, which will essentially ask you to shut down the plant for a couple of hours or maybe a couple of days. This is something which none of the investor wants. So one thing is very clear: is an investor looking at not paying money? The answer is no. It would like peaceful atmosphere, amicable atmosphere for the project to run for not today, 25 years. So at the back of the mind, yes, I don't think there's an issue of cutting down the cost, but yes, you can't overpay also. At the end, because the simple logic is electricity is a very price sensitive subject in India. We have auctions today. The entire auction is based on tariff. So obviously you have bidded for a project, same time you also have to make the project viable at the same tariff. Other project will never run. What rather I have found in the last 20, 25 years of my experience in renewables is when any project comes up in such remote locations, in case of what mentioning about Rajasthan, I was seen in places like Maharashtra, like Satara wind farm projects. I think the wind guys went after maybe 400 years back. Shivaji went there. Nobody went there for 400 years. It was totally barren. And what we found was when you start putting up projects over there, you actually have a positive impact on the social demography over there. First of all, you created employment. That's a key part to it. I agree. People who were doing traditional agriculture may not be doing traditional agriculture, but something else. They upgrade. They learn. Establishments comes up, hotels come up, restaurants come up, transport policies, facilities come up. More importantly, a lot of villages gets connected because of the infrastructure created. So you actually are mainstreaming these people. What I have found, at least it's a first-hand experience in Maharashtra, the disparity has got reduced. Because initially what used to happen, only few used to control the economy in the rural area. With the projects coming up over here, you have ample opportunity of economic benefits. So it all up to an individual to how much he wants to get into it. So we found is disparity has reduced, they become more mainstream, they got more connected. And at least in case of Satara, I know because I was personally a part of that project. Because of the wind farm, Satara got connected to a village called Patan, which was just about 20 kilometers away, sure, but otherwise take about 2 hours. And interestingly, because of the wind farm roads, they started applying even local transport buses on that. Connectivity got better. Whole idea is that. And that's also true about Rajasthan, to that matter, any other places where you essentially go for development. But I fully agree with you that, we need to also look at the social standards, the environmental standards, and I think that is kept on evolving. And I'm quite sure it will get evolved further. I don't think there's any issue from generator's side to not look, sure, at it. Because as I said, at the end of the day, project needs to run for 25 years. Sure. And if it can't run for 25 years, it's something to really wrong.
Thank you, Chintan. Mr. Verma? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It is okay? Yeah. So I just want to react to on the respect to the land, the developers which we have been buying. And this for renewable space, either as solar or wind, we have been only targeting this wasteland, non-irrigated land, where there's no cultivation, or this rocky land. So, so there is no basically conflict with respect to the resource management. They want this for agriculture purposes and we are taking away for industrial or for energy purposes. So that is not the case in the majority of the cases. Like even if you go to Rajasthan or Gujarat.
I think that is where the contestation is, Mr. Verma, that, for instance, even government's understanding of what the underlying use case seems to be limited. So, I mean, obviously that is the main issue we're trying to solve for here. In many cases, while you rightly say, right, that's the information that's been made available to you. Chintan mentioned this as well. Yeah. That Sarkar to kehti hai ki this is forest land, this is this, but you find that something else is happening there. So how do you then, come up with a truth that's universal, right? So, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interject, but,
this is my point of view. Whenever we go and just scout for a land for these projects, we have been traditionally going, and we are conscious of this to interact with the stakeholders, the wherever we are going. I can say for my company, from since very beginning, we have been, wherever we go to setting up those projects, we interact with the society there itself. Of course, we need to have some land facilitators, which can be a con man at a later date, we don't know. But we do take due diligence so that there is minimum conflict. are basically no conflict. And then there is no limit to greed. Like if I can just give you an example, in the very initial beginning in the 2008, 2009, the land prices were 20,000, 25,000. Even this, the sarpanch of that village used to move on a motorcycle. And when our project was there, he was having 2 Fortuners. So, so if we do the things in a proper way, right way, I think those conflicts can be, lot of conflicts can be avoided. And if there's some antisocial, they have some other personal agenda, okay, those things are also there.
Sure.
And secondly, this all these players in the renewable space, they have international investors, and we have guidelines, and so we do take care of those. We don't do anything which is not good for the society, or even if we took that inspector from wherever we are buying our equipments, there is no child labor or like that. So we go to up to that extent, and those are large companies now with respect to GST, all those taxation and other things. So our investors are very conscious कि whatever we're doing, and then we have ESG reporting and all that. It is not that we have been doing it just because of compliance of law. It's a matter of principle.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Verma. Thank you. Mr. Kashyap, I mean, if you can reflect on, I think maybe both Chintan and Mr. Verma's response, right? I think perhaps, again, you being the last speaker in this row, you may agree only, but if there's any nuance that you want to add to that, you could use
While I completely agree with Chintan and my friend, I would like to continue in terms of where I started the journey of 5,000 acres land, and we have done a lot of land in Rajasthan and other places also.
Speak a little louder again, sorry.
The fundamental is, as Chintan explained when he started his initial dialogue, that if somebody is earning 30,000 from there, either you give him 30,000 or probably 10% more than that, so that he is inclined to give you the land and he is able to earn that much money. Now, when you take land for a project, let's say 300 megawatt, 1,200 acres of land, you're essentially giving a village, maybe 70, 80 families, 3 crores a year on the lease. Then you are also utilizing their equipments like tractors during the project time. You are utilizing some of the basic services like tree, grass cutting and other things, module cleaning within the village generally. And you are also giving some construction work depending on the capability of the people which they can take up. And obviously, sarpanches and all those people would have more financial muscle, and they could create more money during the project. These days, the problem is coming where people were not able to lease out the land. Now, there is a big difference. Somebody in the same village, because there's never used to be any crop or anything, so all these were barren lands and they were not making any money. Now, part of the village is able to make money and part is not. Now, the part that is not making money, that is where the problem is, and therefore CSN and other initiatives will come into play with more and more engagement. Otherwise, those people will generally try to create more problems rather than owners.
So, I didn't understand. Why did they not lease their... Because you did not ask for it?
No, because you only wanted 1,200 acres.
Okay.
And the total land available was 5,000 acres, let's say.
Okay. Got it. So you're saying that not everybody was satisfied with the fact that they weren't. Yeah. Okay.
So therefore it is required to be having more engagement with the community, and that too at the sarpanch or the leader level, that what else you can do to satisfy those people as well who are not a part of that journey with you as a project. Look, the owners who are already there with you, who's leased out the land, they want the project to move on, because that is where they believe if there is something which happens to this project, look, our income is going to stop. It's like they've got a government job without anybody in that job.
Sure. Radhika, quick reflections on this? I mean, effectively, if, to meet higher standards, whether it's ESG mandated or otherwise, of the energy that you're basically buying, is paying a little bit more something that Wipro would consider? Or do you feel that paying alone will sort of get you that higher quality? Or do you feel that it will necessarily mean that you spend the hours in sort of, doing the back checks and, investing it in investing your resources in some way, right? To do an independent assessment of whether this is happening on the ground. What do you feel is the approach that Wipro would take as a big buyer of renewable energy? Yeah.
Yeah, so there are a few ways of kind of looking at it, right? So, will Wipro pay extra to get renewable energy that is responsible? I mean, I don't know from what I'm hearing from the panelists. I don't know if paying more will necessarily give us more responsible RE. I mean, I don't know. I mean, because there seems to be all kinds of views there. But I mean, in the past, for example, when you look at the green tariff versus regular tariff, green tariff was a little bit more, right? And we have commitments, but not only that, we as a company, we are committed to doing the right thing. And so I think at that time we were okay to pay a little bit more. And I think that's not, but the question is really how much more. I mean, I think so that's and whether that will really translate into value. I think that is important, right? But more importantly, it's also, I think, the processes that we set, and I think that is something that we, as I said, we anyway do it with our suppliers. But I think now with this whole, our move to towards group captive and things like that, we will be probably looking at this a lot more closely. I think in terms of setting processes, in terms of auditing and kind of third-party audits and things like that. So that's probably something that we will anyway as a company kind of think of going towards. And so I think it's less about the payment, but more about how much value we can get.
Of the outcomes, right? Sure. Simran, I'm going to give you the last word before we turn to the audience. But this point that she raised, I mean, I think she brought up earlier as well. Does the the increased participation of this group captive folks, right? We're obviously smaller entities, right? They're not large developers who are looking at large tracts of land. Does it necessarily distort their incentive for doing things the right way? Because effectively they are true mercenaries, right? They're looking for the cheapest source of electricity, right? Or do you feel, like Chintan said, they'll also be interested in ensuring this 25 years, I want to ensure that the energy is there. So ultimately, of course, money is linked to this initial performance. But do you think group captive necessarily is worse, or would you prefer like large developers, and you feel like they may be better at catering to the community's requirements a little better?
I don't see much of a difference, honestly, right? Any company, and even the government, why are you calling group captive folks, right? If the government wants cheapest electricity, so our industry can compete, affordability can be increased, and that's natural, right? Decentralization is great, right? And we can discuss it separately, even in terms of economics. If you stop discounting the wheeling charges, etc., transmission losses you take into account, distribution losses into account, our analysis say you're saving 1.72 paisa, 1.71 rupees 72 paisa per unit of electricity compared to tail end integration, right? So there's a broader opportunity of lowering the cost of transition with decentralization. Decentralization has its own problems. It can't be a top-down approach. It's an ecosystem approach. You have to have more players, more capabilities, more technicians on the ground, policies which are, again, facilitate access, infrastructure, the distribution infrastructure, right? So that's a different challenge altogether, which it's not, I think, consistently being addressed. But I also want to respond to Chintan and Sandeep. See, what I'm trying, and the issue is very complex and very nuanced, and this panel can never do justice to it, right? For example, when you talk about land acquisition, information asymmetry in when the project is coming, that knowledge, by the time it comes to becomes a common knowledge for the community, the people and companies, middlemen, land aggregators, land mafia, so to speak, get involved and acquire land. And they are the ones that get DISCOM windfall benefit. So what I'm trying to say, actually, the companies actually have a lesser role to play. It's far more complex, and we have to look at the social structure. The point of, that investor want community to be satisfied. Now, I will say that a community I can maintain, protect my project, also by working with those who are powerful within the community. I'll give you an example. My people went to a panchayat, they were doing the work, and they said, oh, that other panchayat is doing a great job of negotiating contracts. We also find out that this contracts not coming to local communities, a lot of BS. It's 33 out of 33, 32 contracts were to local community. Now the local contractor is hiring people from Bihar and Odisha for cheap labor. And what does the company do? It's not company's prerogative to mandate, you need to hire local at a higher rate also, right? And then, okay, they went to the other panchayat, and it's basically a fort. Right? You have big cars, you have security company behind who is also in charge of security of the camp. And they say, they were inquiring, what's happening, are there any issues? They said, sab acha hai, chai piyo aur niklo. All is good, drink tea and leave. Right? So we have to acknowledge at the policy level, this is not a corporate issue, this is not a investor money issue, but at the public policy level, the intersection of unprecedented capital investment in regions which have never seen it before, and how it intersects with social and cultural values, structures. Sure. It's something that definitely needs attention.
Sure. I think we've all seen that in the nouveau riche of Gurgaon, and we've got all experience on Delhi roads with that, so we don't have to be reminded of that, I think. But basically, Simran's absolving you guys of all your responsibility, right? He's saying that it's not really a problem. It's because, a lot of money is going to those communities that this is coming in. It would happen in the case of anyone.
Equal and important shareholders in this process.
Sure. But we probably have about 2-3 minutes for questions. Let's get a round of questions and see what the common threads are and see what all we can take. I see some hands up. Can we have a few mics? Can you keep it to a question and not a detailed comment? Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Since we're talking about people-centric business models in responsible RE, one could look at private equity evolving recently to adopt business models wherein labor, workers being acquired as part of the target companies, that they are giving equity stakes. So that capital structures are evolving from the financial sponsor side. Something like that could, not an analogous comparison, but could some similar structures be explored?
So who will have the equity stake? I didn't get that.
The labor, the workers.
Okay, so basically you have the local project, the people who've given their land, do they get an equity stake? Chintan, maybe that probably will speak, yours or maybe anyone else. Okay. Yeah, Vishal, please, yeah.
Let me just add to his question. Like there are examples in Australia where people maybe wanted a land and a bank in their area, and they have been given like pension sort of amount. So my question is there a lack of an intermediary in this process, like a social scientist or a local organization, which is going to do like a needs assessment more than an impacts assessment? Okay, and gentleman there behind the camera, yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I think I sense a theme here, and my question is also very similar. So what I was thinking of was like the green revolution is like a very individual focus, which is like self-sufficiency, and then there's the white revolution, which was more cooperative led. So is there a solution here where it is the agrarian agrovoltaics is individual and like a smaller scale, but then there are these larger projects which, it's not fertile land, it's just like barren land which is lying around and people own that land. But can there be a cooperative model like the white revolution where we can integrate that with the energy surplus communities and then the energy sufficient communities or something like that?
Interesting analogy. Okay, I think maybe I will stop with those questions. Okay, there's a lady with a question. Maybe yeah. Neeraj,
hi, this is Anjali from Global Wind Energy Council. I think I just want to make this for thermal power generators or generation power projects. We talk about non-performing assets, but when we come to renewable energy, what we do after 25 years, when we think about people-centric business model and what happens to those projects after decommissioning.
They'll be repowered, right? Anyway, no, it's okay. No, that was a quip.
What about socioeconomic aspects?
Sure. Sorry, that was a quip. That was not a response. Right, no but Chintan, so maybe that first question, I think it was interesting, right? Yeah. To see whether we can actually think of people as stakeholders in the project where they monetarily gain from the investment, and then the others, if you want to field any of those questions.
So as I was trying to put that narrative when people were buying land and moved to lease model. So lease model is, I would say, is a midway, essentially already involving the stakeholder and giving them a lease amount. The good part with the lease amount, it is independent of the generation of electrons. Now, what you're trying to tell you is make this business model on a kilowatt hour basis. Yes, definitely. That's what everybody would prefer to do so. But I think time is not ripe for that today at this juncture, because the whole idea is the farmer would like the minimum fixed revenue. If my wind farms fail or my solar farm fails, he doesn't get anything. So it's got to be evolved in the future. And as far as Anjali, what talked about is 25 years, the ecosystem would have been created for renewables. So obviously repowering will be much easier, and entire social strata would have moved around the renewables only by that time. For example, a building is here in India Habitat Center. After 40 years, what will happen? Yes, we reconstruct the building. That's what happens, because the strata has been created. You're not changing the strata at all. Rather, the strata is stronger. So repowering definitely would be a case in the future.
The panelists, you heard the questions. Do you have any specific response to the questions, Verma?
I think perfectly.
Okay, Simran, yeah. Do any?
Yeah, just a quick response on the white revolution and the cooperative. I work in the philanthropy space, and in philanthropy, donors ask what is the solution. But unfortunately, I'm a problems guy. I tell them I will tell you better what is the problem, right? And that's often we don't understand problems. These are complex issues, especially historical, cultural, and it will vary from state to state, village to village, etc. What's the social capital? What's the cultural capital? What's the ecological or natural capital, etc. And how it will be impacted by a project, etc. It's really hard to understand, and many of us don't even have the capabilities to really fully understand it, right? It could be a solution. It could be a possible solution, but we are also, when you talk about decentralization, when to talk about cooperative, you are also talking about redistribution of power and capital, right? And people in power don't really look at it, with the willingness, right? There will be resistance to it. How the change will come, I don't know. There could be many ways, but yeah, it could be a solution. It could not be. Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, if the gains of renewable energy are basically going to the ones who are the landed class, we are going to find this problem. So, how do you basically take effectively the resource which is tied with the land, right, to people who are also benefiting off the land is a big question. I'm sorry we couldn't do justice to those elements. We got stuck in one sort of narrow corner, but I think that's evolving area of research. So hopefully we can speak to that in the coming months. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to the panelists also for your wonderful responses. Thank you, Radhika, for being with us remotely. Thank you.